Okay, good evening, everyone. David Cashman here with SEB Housing. This is the affordable housing information session for the affordable units at Edgemere Crossing in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. And tonight we're just going to be going over some of the biggest and what I think are the most kind of salient, important details about this opportunity and this program. I'll start by telling you a little bit about the development and some of the details. Then we'll talk about the eligibility requirements and how to submit an application, and then tell you a little bit more about what to expect after we've run the lottery and proceeding forth and applying for one of these affordable units. Just so to give you a little bit of background, SEB Housing is an off-site affordable housing consulting and lottery group. So we're not the management team, we're not the developer, we're not the owner, and we're not at the property, nor will we be. But we do work with this property, which is owned and managed by the Dolben Company, and we work with them at some of their other sites as well. And we work with a lot of other development and management teams to help them in marketing affordable housing units and running lotteries. And one of the biggest functions that we have is to interact with the applicants for these opportunities, to answer their questions and to assess their eligibility for this program. If you haven't done so already, I encourage you to visit our website, which is www.sebhousing.com. And on our website, you can navigate to the Affordable Housing Opportunities page and then click I want to rent. And then you'll see the icon with a picture for Edgemere Crossing. You click on that, and that'll take you to a page that's specific to this development. And on that page, you'll find the affordable housing application and the information packet. And much of what I'm going to cover tonight is drawn directly from the information packet. So you can always go there, and I recommend you do. Even if you watch this session, I won't cover everything that's in the information packet. It's too detailed and would take too long. I will try and cover what I think are the most important parts. But take a look. You can download it, print it, and you can also download the application right from our website and fill it out and send it in to us. The instructions for where and how to submit it are right on the front page of the application, but you can basically submit it in any number of ways, including scanning and emailing it to us. You can fax it to us. You can send it in the mail. And you can even come to our office in Needham, 257 Hillside Ave, right off the Needham Heights train station, and you can drop it off. If it's during normal business hours, there may be someone here to take it. But even if not, we have a 24-hour blue drop box right outside our office. As you walk up, you'll see it right on the left-hand side of the building, and you can put it in there. And we check it every day, and we'll get it. Also, if you haven't already, you can check out the property. It doesn't look like maybe a fully finished website, but they do have some information. If you look up Edgemere Crossing, the Dolben Company does have some information with a sort of a landing page and a few photos. You'll see a rendering on there, as well as some photos of actual construction that's happening. And you can see, some of the buildings are in various states of being completed. Some of them are framed up. Some of them look like they're totally finished with roofs on them. And some of them are coming along at a later time. Sort of implicit in that is that this development consists of multiple buildings, I think 9 in total, that will have residential rental units within them, as well as a clubhouse. In total, there'll be 250 rental units at this development. It used to be the site of the former Edgemere Drive-In movie theater. And I guess there's a brand new Market Basket supermarket under construction right nearby, as well as a number of other commercial and businesses. If you look at the map, this property looks to be in a pretty neat location. It's kind of right on the eastern edge of Flint Pond and appears to have a lot of green, space around it. But at the same time, is pretty close to Route 140, Shrewsbury Street, and is in between Hartford Turnpike, which is Route 20, and to the north, and Route 90 and Route 30 to the south. So it appears to be sort of a quiet location that's got some nice green space around it, but at the same time in a short drive or possibly even a walk, depending on how much you're willing to walk, you can be at a number of different commercial areas, businesses, restaurants, shops, and even on some major thoroughfares to get you to various points, east, west, north, south. So a good location. The clubhouse, as I mentioned, there is a clubhouse that's going to have a business center, a fitness center, a dog washing station, a dog park. There'll be outdoor grilling space with a fire pit. There'll be bike storage and a swimming pool on site. The units themselves will be high-end, have nice appliances. There'll be in-unit washers and dryers. There'll be vinyl plank flooring and granite countertops. And as you may or may not know, Shrewsbury is pretty close to Worcester and about 45 minutes west of Boston. As I said before, you got pretty easy access to Route 90, so you can get to points east and west relatively easily. So as I said before, there are 250 units total at this development, 25 of which will be made affordable through this application process. And the units are expected to start coming online in the spring of 2022, so pretty soon. But as there are multiple buildings, they won't all be ready at exactly the same time. They'll be coming online over a matter of a number of months. And as we'll talk about later, when we talk about the waiting lists, one of the advantages to having a higher waiting list position is you'll be able to choose from the available units. And you may want a unit that's in one of the first buildings to be ready, or you may want a unit that's in one of the buildings to be delivered later on or last in the process, just depending on your kind of current time frames and circumstances. And so the units, as I said, will be, I think, 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom units. The 1 bedrooms will have 1 bathroom, and the 2 bedroom units will have 2 bathrooms. The affordable units, 12 of them will be 1 bed, 1 bathroom units. And the average size on those ranges from about 620 square feet to about 880 square feet. I think several of those also have sort of an office as well. They're a little bit big. Those are the bigger ones. And there are a number of those that are included in this opportunity. 2 of the units are built out with features for persons with mobility impairment. So if you have a mobility impairment, you're disabled, you would get preference for those units. You can also, it can and will be on the waiting list for the other units that don't have those features, but you will get preference for those units if you need those features. And the rents for those units are $1,440 per month. There are also 13 affordable 2-bedroom, 2-bath units. Those are between 1,000 and 1,100 square feet. The rent on those is $1,588 per month, and 2 of those units are built out for persons with mobility impairments, and the same priority as I just discussed for the 1-bedroom units will apply for any households who need those special features, which usually include things like lower countertops, maybe lower cabinets, grab bars, possibly wider doorways to get through. We'll get probably not have rugs. We'll get priority for those units. The rents are set according to the program rules, which takes into account the geographic area as established by HUD, which is the Worcester geographic area. And so the rents are set according to a formula wherein a household theoretically shouldn't be paying more than 30% of their gross income on rent. Now, in actual fact, the rents don't change based on any particular household's income or assets. So the proportion of a household's income that they pay towards rent will vary depending on what their income is. But for your purposes, what's sort of important to recognize and what may set this affordable program apart from other affordable housing programs is that the rents don't change based on any particular applicant's financial circumstances. The rents are the rents are the rents. Now, they may change in future years and they almost certainly will. They can't change mid-lease, but every spring and April, HUD publishes new area median incomes. The rents can be adjusted, and then in any successive lease term, there would be likely a new rent, and you'd get notice of what that would be, and could choose to stay in the unit if you want to pay the different rent. It's possible rents can go down. They don't usually. At most, they may stay the same. In most years, I'd say they go up, but not a huge amount. We're not talking like $200 or $300 usually. In the average year, it may be anywhere from, say, $25 to $75 if it was a big year. I can't say what HUD's going to do in any particular year, but in general, these are not huge increases. But again, rents do not change mid-lease. You get notice of it before it goes into effect. And it may not change in a particular year if area median incomes go down. Please keep in mind that the rents do not include utilities. So, the rent of $14.40 for a one-bedroom or $15.88 for a two-bedroom. On top of that, affordable tenants would have to pay for gas, which is heating and hot water, electricity, which includes cooking, water, and sewer. So the effective or overall rent that affordable tenants will pay is actually going to, ultimately be higher than what I quoted when you factor in those utilities. But each affordable unit will have access to a free parking spot on site. And you know what? Before I go further, I should have said this earlier, and I neglected to. But during these information sessions, we do these vis-a-vis YouTube live stream. There is not a function for people watching to speak out loud, but at any time you can type in a question to the chat box. I'm going to type something there now just so you can see what I'm talking about. Questions are encouraged. I'm happy to stop and answer the question at any time. There's also a simultaneous conference call, so if anyone wants to call into that, they can. But let me just type something in the chat box now so you can see what I'm talking about. And I'm going to put the phone number too for the conference call, just in case there's anyone who wanted to do that. One second. So yeah, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. And as I said before, you can go on our website. I will in a moment be talking a little bit more about income limits, and I'll be throwing around some figures. You don't have to memorize those. You don't have to write those down. All of the rents, the income limits are listed in the information packet. They're on our website. They're in the ad. They're in the application itself. So you don't have to memorize anything or be, writing things down furiously. You can just go on our website, or if you already have the materials in hand, just check them, and you'll see them there in various places. So, the first kind of step, the way to think about this is, the first step is to apply, and we encourage households to do that and to do that early, well in advance of the lottery application deadline, if you can. And the reason for that is because most households, I would say the vast majority of households, do not submit a 100% complete application on the first try. And that's because there is a lot of documentation that's required. It's analogous to what's required if you're trying to get a mortgage commitment. So there's a lot of things that we need to see, as we'll discuss in a little bit. And also, even when households submit exactly what's required, sometimes that raises additional questions, like if there are deposits into a bank account that can't be tied to a job that we know about, and so further explanation is required. So even in instances where households are super diligent and they give us absolutely everything to the letter of what's in the application, the documents that they provide may elicit further questions from us. And so you want to get the application in earlier so that you have time to respond to those questions. The deadline is December 21st. There's no limit to the number of times you can submit an application. And so, you know, some households need 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 tries. That happens. Some households get it all in on the first try, but that's sort of the exception, not the rule. And so I would say it's advantageous to get it in, kind of see where you stand. I mean, I'm not encouraging anyone to submit something that's grossly inadequate if they know there's all kinds of stuff missing. But if you think it's sort of close, get it in, and then you can kind of see exactly what's outstanding and have some time to go get it. I think in this lottery, if you're in the lottery, if you get everything in and you're eligible, I would say there is a very, very, very good chance that you'll have an opportunity to rent one of these units. So there's added incentive there. So the first step is to submit an application and be in the lottery. And so let's talk a little bit about that application process and what the requirements and eligibility criteria are. The first and biggest is that households have to have income and assets that are under the program or qualify under the program limits. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. For the 2-bedroom units, we have to give priority to larger household sizes and compositions that need all of the bedrooms, that need both bedrooms, I should say. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Households cannot own a home upon move-in. They can own a home at the time of application. So if you're sitting there watching this now or at some future date and thinking, I own a home, that's okay. You can own a home and still apply. But if you're otherwise eligible for this opportunity, you meet all of the other criteria, you would get a notice from us that says you're conditionally eligible. And the thing that makes it conditional is that you need to sell your home before you can rent one of these units. And you need to provide proof that you've sold it, usually in the form of a disclosure statement. And then the final criteria is that households or their family members cannot have financial interest in the development. I don't think that happens much at all, so I'm not going to spend much time dwelling on that. But if you have any money or it's sort of tied up in this project, stand to gain anything financially from it, you'd have to disclose that, and that would probably disqualify you. And also, if you're a related party, so if you're directly related to anyone at the Dolvin Company or you work for them, you'd have to disclose that. Or if anyone in your family does, okay, your dad, your mom does, your brother does, you have to disclose that. And that would probably disqualify you as well. And the rationale there is that the program doesn't want there to be any appearance that households are getting preferential treatment because they, you know, work for or are related to the developer / management company. So let's dive in a little bit more about income and assets, because that's certainly the biggest criteria and the one about which there's most to say. The income limits are based on the number of people in your household. Okay, and that's everyone who would be on the lease and everyone who will be living in the unit as their primary residence. Okay, everyone who's going to be on the lease or living in the unit as their primary residence. And again, this is one of those areas where this information is littered throughout the informational materials that we have, so you don't have to write any of this down. Just check the info packet or the application or our website, and you'll find it all there. But for a household size of 1, the income limit is $55,350. For a household size of 2, it's $63,250. For a household size of 3, it's $71,150, and for a household size of 4, it's $79,050. This is gross income of everyone in the household, not net. Okay, it's gross income of everyone in the household, with the exception of minors. Income from employment for minors. Okay, so if there's going to be a 15 or a 12-year-old or 10-year-old moving in with, let's say, their parents, and they have a job, they make $5,000 a year, we're not counting any of that towards the income limits. But other income of minors, like if they're getting regular trust distributions or something like that, that would count. Okay, in any case, it all needs to be disclosed and documented. But that income for the minor from a job would not count towards the income limits. The other exception to the rule that all income of all household members count is for full-time students who are dependents. Anything over $480 does not count. So if you have a child who's a full-time student and they have a job, they make, let's say, $10,000 a year. We're only counting 480 of it towards the income limit. Aside from those two exceptions, all sources of income from all household members pretty much count. And so the income analysis is an analysis projecting forward 12 months. And the best predictor of what a household is likely to make over the next 12 months, which is necessarily an imperfect science. You know, things can change. We can't say exactly what's going to happen in the future, but the best predictor of what a household's likely to make in the next 12 months is what they've been making most recently. And so you'll see that the types of documents that we ask for are, you know, recent pay stubs and recent tax returns. You have to provide your 5 most recent pay stubs. And we have to use that information to extrapolate forward. So that means that things like, and this comes up with some frequency, you know, in your 5 most recent pay stubs, if, you know, we're seeing that you've been working all this overtime, we have to kind of assume that you will continue to work overtime and extrapolate forward in calculating your income as such. And so which 5 pay stubs you provide is going to have some bearing, right? If you've worked overtime just recently, but next week and the following weeks you're not going to, then what we see in those pay stubs with respect to overtime is going to change, and how we have to count it is going to change. In general, statements of my income is likely to change in such and such way or go down in the future are not things that we can sort of factor in without a pattern or history of that happening. So an example is, you know, sometimes people are seasonal employees. They work a lot in, let's say, the summer months. That's when they really make the vast majority of their income. And then in the winter, things really slow down. They may even be unemployed. They work very little or not at all. And they have a history for the last 4 years. Every summer they get really busy, they make all their income. Every winter things really slow down. Now, if we just projected that person's income based on what they made in the summer, that might put them over the income limit. That really wouldn't be an accurate assumption about their income, because the winter doesn't look like the summer, right? So that's one where we could factor in. They have a pattern that shows that, okay, you know, certain parts of the year are busy. That's when they make all or most of their money. But if you don't have such a pattern or history, then in general statements of, yes, I know I made 80,000 last year, and yes, I know I'm on track to make about 80,000 this year, but I'm not going to work as much next year. That's my New Year's resolution. I've decided to kind of cut back, work fewer days, work fewer hours. If you don't have any history of such, we can't just sort of, and this is just program rule, this is not SEB making this up, we can't just sort of take that at face value and say, well, how much do you expect to make? You know, oh, 52,000, that's okay, 52,000 is what we'll count. We have to look at, no, you've been making 80,000, unless something sort of shows more clearly otherwise that it's not going to be that, then we have to kind of assume that you'll earn 80,000 next year, and that's what we'd count towards the income limit. Now, you know, if you made 80,000 and most of that was based on a, you know, a bonus program at your work, and we get something that says conclusively the bonus program is being stricken and will never be instituted, then that might be something that we can factor in, okay? The question is, can you please confirm if the included parking spot includes a garage? Good question. I have to look back through my notes. As I said, I'm not on site, so I don't know off the top of my head. Let me see if I have anything in here. Let me see here. Yeah, I'm sorry. You know, good question, and I don't know if I have that information. If you want to email us, let me just here. So send an email to info@SEB Housing. Say you attended the info session. You're curious about the parking situation. Once I get that, I'll reach out to the development team and find out for you. I just don't know off the top of my head. I know there's parking, but I don't know if it's via a garage or surface. So please email, and I will get you that answer. I'm sorry I don't have it on hand right now. Going back to income, You know, the sources of income that the program requires that we count are varied, and there are, you know, sources of income that most people might not necessarily think of as income when they say income. And so in the application itself, there is an income table. Take your time going through there. There may be items in there that you don't necessarily think of as income, but which count as income. And it would be too bad if you sort of neglected one of those and thought you were eligible, and then, you know, comes to light that you totally forgot to account for your side business where you're self-employed, or you forgot that, you know, didn't realize that child support or alimony counted, or one of these other various sources that the program says we have to count. So when you're filling out the application, go through the income table carefully so you don't overlook anything. And you'll see that the different types of income are varied. You know, it's what you make at your job. That's kind of obvious and the first one that comes to mind. It also includes what you make if you're self-employed, if you're driving, you know, and many people are these days, driving for Uber, Lyft, and things of that nature. You have to fill out a profit and loss statement, which is at the back of the application. You might receive Social Security income or be drawing down from retirement funds. You might receive unemployment compensation or workman's compensation. You might be receiving periodic payments from a friend or family member, which comes up sometimes, and usually comes up in people's bank statements, where we see, you know, every 2 weeks or every month there's a deposit in there that's not from their job, and we ask about it, and they say, oh, well, you know, my parent helps me, which is great. That's great to have that help, but if it's recurring, if it's every couple weeks or every month, that's something that we have to count towards the income limit. You may have assets that generate some interest income. You know, typically bank accounts don't generate much, but they can. They usually generate some, or you have a certificate of deposit where you know, give it to the bank for 6 months or a year or 2 years. You can't touch it. Those usually do a little bit better in terms of the interest that they generate. And so that gets counted too. So go through the table carefully. That'll kind of cue you into many of the different sources of income that count. In section 2 of the application, it'll get more into the nitty-gritty of exactly what we need with respect to each of those income sources, but the sort of general roadmap, I think, to give you the high-level view of the types of income sources that count is in the table. So spend some time looking through it, and that will help ensure that you don't overlook anything. And so that's it. There's probably a whole lot more that could be said about income, but income is different for every single applicant, and probably most people won't even realize what their questions are until they start going through the application. So if you have questions as you start going through it, great, reach out to us. We'll be happy to walk you through it. As far as minimum incomes, okay, so we just talked about maximum incomes. There are program maximum income limits that are set by HUD every year in April, so they change every April. And they're set according to household size, right? So what your applicable income limit is, it's going to change depending on your household size. For the greater the number of people, the higher the income limit will be. There are no program minimum incomes. However, the leasing office wants to make sure that anyone, whether an affordable applicant or a market rate applicant, has sufficient income and assets to be able to afford the rent each month. So they perform a minimum income lease screening for all applicants, because they want to make sure that in month 3, the person's not going to say, hey, I can't afford the rent. I'm sorry. The ratio that they use is 40%. In other words, a household has to have about make about 2.5 times the rent in income in order to pass their lease screening criteria. Now, if you have a voucher, totally ignore what I've just said on this and what I'm about to say on this. There is no minimum income screening that applies to you. That's what the voucher is for. You pay 30% of your income, and you don't need to worry about any minimum income screening. But if you don't have a voucher, when you apply for the lottery, will do a sort of quicker, more surface assessment to see if the leasing office's screening criteria on this is met. If it's close, we'll probably say that's good enough for us. And we can look at assets, right? So if you don't quite make enough in income to meet this criteria, then, but if you have, quite a bit in liquid assets, then that can be considered to bump you up to meet the criteria. Now, with maximum income, we talked about it being based on the number of people in the household. For minimum income, it's based on the bedroom size that you're applying for, because it's really effectively an assessment of will you be able to afford the rent, which has nothing to do with the number of people in your household. It has to do with the rent of the bedroom size that you're applying for. So for a one bedroom, the minimum income and assets threshold is a little over $43,000. And for a two bedroom, it's a little under $48,000. And so what that means is that, effectively there's kind of a window. That's what this, where people can qualify. There's a window. They make more than the minimum income amount, which is sort of the base of the window, and they make under the maximum, which is the program limit. So there's somewhere in this slice. And how big that slice is depends on which bedroom size you're applying for and how many people are in your household. Okay, so if you're, applying for a one bedroom and you're two people, you're going to have about a $20,000 window, because you have to make about $43,000 to meet the leasing office screening criteria, but you got to be under $63,000 to meet the program income limits. Now, if you're a one person applying for a one bedroom, that window is going to get a little smaller, because you still need to make about $43,000 to meet the leasing office's screening criteria, but now your income limit is $55,000. Okay, so it's a smaller window. And by the way, these income limits, if there's anyone watching who's watched any other info sessions or been involved in any other affordable housing opportunities, they're geographic. So you might be looking at these and saying these are different than this other property I saw, which is in the eastern part of the state. And that's true, right? So the in this program, the maximum income limits can be different and are different depending on where the property is. These income limits are in the Worcester area. They're lower than what they are in Boston. Okay, so if you were to look on our website and apply to an opportunity that's in the Boston, Cambridge, Quincy, which includes dozens and dozens and dozens of towns, the income limit for a household size of one is a little over 70,000, whereas here it's 55,000. Okay, now the rents there will be higher too. But just if anyone's watching and scratching their head saying, why are these income limits different? That's because it's, maybe in a different geographic area than another opportunity that you had looked at before. Okay. So that's income. Take a look at the info pack, take a look at the application. You may very well have additional questions as you start going through it. That's great. Reach out to us. We're happy to work through it with you. Assets like income are by program rule defined, perhaps more expansively than what people necessarily think of as their assets, and can include things like your checking or savings account. That's probably one of the first things that comes to mind, but it can also include things like Venmo or PayPal or other cash apps, which many people use these days. I know I use them. Effectively, that money in there sits there just like it's in a checking account. Goes in, you can use it to pay someone else. We talked a little bit in the example I used earlier about certificates of deposit, which are kind of like savings accounts at banks where you can't touch the money for 6 months or a year or some period of time, and they tend to do better in terms of interest rates that they give you. That's an asset. You may have retirement accounts, and we do need to know the net cash value of those, even if you're not planning on accessing them for years to come. There's no asset limit, though, okay? There's no asset limit for rental opportunities, including this one. So it doesn't really matter, except insofar as the interest that your asset generates, because there is an income limit, and interest counts towards the income. But there's no asset limit in and of itself. So you could have quite a bit in a checking and savings account or a trust account or a certificate of deposit, or maybe you own some mutual funds or stocks or bonds. That's okay. There's no asset limit, but we do need to know the income that is generated by those assets, and that does get counted towards the income limit, which we have now talked about. can include things like maybe you get dividends from stocks you own. That counts as income. You might have an investment property, and there's income generated there. Of course, if you own a home, whether you live there or you're using it as an investment, that does need to be sold prior to being able to rent one of these units, as I talked about towards the beginning of this presentation. So, you know, that's assets. There's a table in the application that details many of the different assets that count. Take your time, go through there just as you do with the income table so that you don't overlook anything and fail us to provide the documents that you need to provide. It's just a good kind of roadmap reminder for you for different asset sources that can count and where you're going to need to go get information. Typically for assets, the last 3 most current statements. But again, the application will tell you exactly what we need for each type of asset. Assets don't include personal assets. So collections of, you know, jewelry, let's say, or, you know, cars or whatever. Those personal assets are not something you need to document or something that we are looking at. Okay, so that's income and assets. There's, again, there's plenty more that could be said, but I'm going to stop there because I think everyone's income and asset situation is different, and you'll have specific questions. If you have specific questions on yours, you can address those to us as you go through the application. We'll be happy to work with you through it. Let's talk a little bit about, you know, kind of submitting your application and what happens next. So deadline is December 21st to submit your lottery application. As I said, get it in early. We can work through it with you if you're missing anything. If you are missing something, we'll give you a bulleted, detailed list of here's what you're missing, here's what we need. You go and work on getting those things. Shakayla, who is eligible to apply for the lottery? Well, that's kind of what we're going through, and I'm not sure I can give you like a really quick 1 sentence or even 1 paragraph answer. I don't know how long you've been on the info session 4. We've talked about there are income limits, okay? And I'll just say again, those are based on the number of people in your household size. So for a household size of 1, it's a little over 55,000. For a household size of 2, it's a little over 63,000. For a household size of 3, it's a little over 71,000. And for a household size of 4, it's a little over 79,000. Those are the limits. You can't make more than that in gross income. And you also have to disclose what your different assets are, but there's no asset limit, okay? I don't know when you joined, but if you haven't, you know, take a look through the information packet, or you can go back and rewatch this at a later time. You know, there's a lot to be said about income and assets. But if you have questions as you're going through the application, you know, we can certainly work through those with you. But I guess I would just stop and say there are income and asset limits, and also to be eligible, you need to get an application in by the deadline. If your development's affordable housing program is... Okay, so the next question from Shakayla is, well, what if your development's affordable housing program is SEB? Oh, so you're already living in an affordable unit where SEB is involved? If so, the answer is that's no problem. You can, you know, we don't own the properties. We're not the developer. We're not the management team. So if you're living in an affordable unit in one place where SEB is involved and we're doing the certifications and stuff, and you're thinking about applying for this one, that's fine. People do that all the time. Yep, you can do that. No problem. And depending on when you last certified for the current place you live, we may even be able to use some of the stuff that we have on file. Like if we have your taxes for last year, we may be able to just pull that back up so you don't have to resubmit that. Kind of jumping back where I was a minute ago, for the 2-bedroom units, we have to, I'm sorry, what I was saying was if you submit an application, you're incomplete, we'll tell you exactly what's missing. If you're not eligible, we'll tell you what, that and why. And if you are eligible, we'll send you a lottery application number, which will be in the form of A.blank blank blank. which is merely an anonymous identifier to be used in the lottery. And it has no bearing on kind of where you'll be on the waiting list or if you're going to move forward or not or anything like that. It's just to kind of keep your name out of it. So when you get that number, it'll be on a letter, which will also include some other details from what you submitted to us. You want to just, and when the lottery is and how to access it and all that. So it's only like a page, multiple spaced page. Shouldn't take long to go through. Take a minute to look at it. Make sure everything we put in there is consistent with what you think you put in your application, because it'll say, like, you know, here are the people that you put in your household. Here's your household type. Here's, you know, you applied for a 1-bedroom, or you applied for a 2-bedroom, or you applied for both. You said you did or did not need a disabled unit. You said that you did or, oh no, there's no local preference here. So, so have some of those details, and you just want to take a look at it and make sure that what we put on there is consistent with what you thought you put in your application. I should say as well, when you're filling out the application, if you're saying, well, should I apply for a 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom? I could kind of go either way. The answer is, if you think you could be interested in either, apply for both. There's no downside to doing so at all. Okay, there's no downside to doing so at all. Conversely, if you just apply for a 1-bedroom and then later after the lottery you say, well, I wish I had applied for a 2-bedroom, then you can still do that. You just can't use your lottery position. You kind of lose some of your advantage from having been in the lottery. So it's better to apply for both. And the worst thing that happens is you say, I changed my mind. I don't want a 2-bedroom. I just want to move forward with a 1-bedroom. And that's fine. There's absolutely no problem with that. So if you think you might be interested in both, apply for both. And so we'll do the lottery in the same format as we're doing this info session. So everything's still virtual. The lottery will be on January 10th. And when we do the lottery, the way it works is that every single person who's eligible for the lottery gets put in a box. And then I will draw their application numbers out one by one. I'll show them up to the screen. I'll call them as I go. And as you're watching, you can't tell exactly what it means usually. To some extent, you may be able to, but for most people, you can't, because everyone's in there, right? Everyone who's eligible for the lottery, independent of, whether they applied for a 1-bedroom unit or a 2-bedroom unit or both, independent of their household type and what priorities they have for the units. And so in the exact moment I'm drawing the numbers, it's a little hard to say exactly what it means. But the good news is that within, usually an hour or two of the lottery, we can sort the results onto the waiting list, and we'll send you the waiting list so you know exactly where you stand relative to other lottery households. Those waiting lists will be kind of ordered top to bottom. Now, in terms of preference, top to bottom in terms of preference. Now, oftentimes households say, like, who won the lottery? And the answer is there's no winners and there's no losers. Everyone gets picked and everyone has a waiting list position. Okay, everyone gets picked, everyone has a waiting list position. So if you applied for both the 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom, and we put you in the lottery and we say, hey, you applied for both, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, you're eligible for both, you'll be on both waiting lists. If you applied for the 1-bedroom and the 2-bedroom and we said you're only eligible for the 1-bedroom, you don't make enough for the 2-bedroom, then you'll just be on the 1-bedroom waiting list. Okay, and vice versa with the 2-bedroom. So you'd be on every waiting list that you applied for and were eligible for. The waiting lists establish the order of priority for moving forward in the next step in the process. So waiting lists can sound like a bit of a misnomer because their units are going to be immediately available. So you're not like waiting behind other people as well. The waiting lists from the lottery are all the people who are kind of in the mix at the start, and it just sort of ranks them relative to one another. Shakayla, can you be a full-time student to apply while working full-time? Yep, you can be a full-time student and working and apply. There's no rule against that. And so we'll create the waiting list, and you'll see exactly where you are relative to other households on the waiting list. Those waiting lists establish the order of priority for applying for a lease. So that's kind of when SEB steps back from the process a little bit, and at that point you begin to engage with the leasing office. And that's where having to apply for a unit. Remember, at this point, you have not undergone a lease screening eligibility sort of analysis, right? We're not the management company. We're not on site. We're not performing the same reviews that a leasing office performs to see if people meet their lease screening criteria. So we're not looking to see if you have a criminal background. We're not looking at your credit. We're not checking tenant or landlord references or any of those things, right? So, getting into the lottery means that you have been deemed by SEB to be program eligible. That's not the final step yet. We haven't said that you're also definitely lease eligible. That's not our function. So if you're number one on a wait list, please do not go telling your current landlord, if you have one, hey, I'm moving out, next month because I'm moving to this new property. See you later. It's possible you may not be eligible for a lease. I hope you are. You may not be. Okay. And that happens. A household can be program eligible, but not lease eligible. And a household can also be lease eligible, but not program eligible. But if you're not both, then unfortunately, you're not going to be able to move forward at this development. So we will pass over after the lottery the waiting list to the management team, and they will then kind of step in and start to be your main point of contact moving forward. And they'll reach out to you and they'll start inviting you and other households from the waiting list to come in and apply for leases. And at that point, they'll show you what the different units are that are available from the waiting lists and which building they're in. There are 9 residential buildings at this development, and they're not all being delivered at exactly the same time. And so, and they'll do, credit references probably, and criminal background check, and probably some kind of landlord check as well. So they'll do some of those screenings, and they'll show you which units are available, and you can select from the available units. So this is where having a higher waiting list position really becomes important, because let's just say, you're the number one household on the 1-bedroom waiting list. You're going to be able to choose from any of the affordable 1-bedroom units. Okay, and if you're the number one household on the 2-bedroom waiting list, you're going to be able to choose from any of the 2-bedroom units. You may want the one that's in building 1. You may want the one that's in building 9, or any of them that are in between, right? And that's sort of, and so once you, reserve your unit, then households behind you would get to select from any of the remaining units. So there is an advantage to being higher on the waiting list. And obviously there's no kind of, the fact that you have choice kind of implicitly means like there aren't specific units designated to specific spots on each waiting list. That's not how it works. So it's not like, if you're number one on a waiting list, then the unit that corresponds to that is unit 101, and that's the one that you can get. No. If you're number one on the waiting list, you can choose from any of the available units on that list. Okay. And I should say as well, the affordable units are scattered throughout the building. So I think there are like 2 or 3 in each building. And those units have been approved by the town and by the state to be fairly distributed and not recognizable in any way or fashion as affordable units to anyone kind of walking through the hallway of these buildings. So they've been approved as kind of fair and equitable and evenly representative of all the units in the development. So it's not like they're all kind of in one building clustered together or anything like that. Okay, quite the opposite. I think there are affordable units, I believe, in all 9 buildings at this development. Okay, so if you're in the lottery, you're eligible, determined to be eligible by SEB, then you move forward, you pass the lease screening criteria, that's great. At that point, you can reserve the unit of your choice and then move forward and sign a lease. And that's great. You're kind of done with screening for a while. Should you live in the unit for a year and decide that you want to renew your lease, you can do that. Every year you have to demonstrate program eligibility. So, you know, if you're in the unit, probably about roughly 3 months before your lease is up and you're deciding, and if you're going to sign a new lease, you have to show that you continue to be eligible for the program. And so you'd have to update your, you know, income and asset documentation. You probably have to provide new tax returns, updated bank statements, pay stubs showing that you're still eligible. I recognize that's not the most fun process. The upside is you will have done it before, so you kind of know what's required and what to expect. If you kind of update your file of documents throughout the year, then that may make it a lot easier. You kind of have everything on hand that you're going to need. And the other good thing is that the income limits go up pretty substantially for renewing tenants. So whereas, for example, a household size of 1 can make up to about $55,000 to be eligible initially for this program. If they make more than that, then they make too much. That same household, a year down the road, if they're already in a unit, now they're a recertifying affordable tenant, they can now make up to over $77,000. You've got more than a $22,000 cushion. So if in the year that they're living in the unit, they do pretty well at work, their income goes up, they may, that, you know, they don't necessarily need to decline the, you know, pay raise or something. They may still very well be eligible for the program, which has these increases permitted. Okay, so the question is, could you please confirm if the units are on 1 story or over 2 stories? There are several stories in each of the buildings. They're not just 1-story buildings. And the accessible units, what floors are those on? Okay, well, I'm going to have to look. Yeah, good question. I need to look at the floor plans. So let's do this. Let me finish this up and see if there are other questions that people have, and we're pretty close to being done. And then I will take a look at the floor plans and see if I can identify the accessible units and exactly where they are. If they're accessible, they're probably, I mean, they're going to have to be on the 1st floor or they're going to have to be elevator service. There's no other way for a unit to be accessible. You know, you can't have it on the 2nd floor with stairs. It's no longer an accessible unit. But let me check, and I'll do that as soon as we kind of wrap up, because that's going to take me a second to look through the floor plans and figure out exactly where those units are. There are 4 in total, but I will come back to you as soon as we've wrapped up, because again, it's going to take me a second to go through the floor plans. So that's it. I actually think that's kind of, let me actually say one more thing, which is that our certification for the lottery is good for 6 months from the lottery date. Okay, it's not good for eternity, which kind of makes sense. You know, if you're eligible in you know, December of 2021, that doesn't mean you're necessarily still eligible, or that nothing has changed in your income or assets in, you know, August of 2022 when 8 months have gone by. So our certifications for the lottery are good for 6 months, which means that provided you move into your unit by July of 2022, you're good. Okay, you're good. But if you end up picking one of the units to be delivered later, which could happen here, I think the build out is going to take a number of months. And let's say you select a unit and you're going to move in August or September of 2022, then you're going to have to update your file with us to show that you're still eligible. Okay, so being eligible for the lottery is great. And if you move into a unit within 6 months of the lottery, great. But if you're picking a unit that's, you know, 9 months later, and I don't know exactly what the final build out will be, and, you know, these things can change. It's fluid. Just keep in mind, you may have to update your file and just show that you haven't like had a huge increase in income in the interim before moving in. So keep that in the back of your mind, that if you pick a later to be delivered unit, keep updating your file. You're probably going to have to do an update if it's, you know, an August or September move in or something like that. All right, I think that's all I got. We're coming up close on an hour. I know Bessie Moo I might be messing that up. I had the question about the accessible units, which I want to get to. Are there any other questions from anyone else tuning in? I'm happy to stick around for a second and try and answer those. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any. So Bessie Moo, I'm gonna start looking through the floor plans. I'm gonna be kind of awkwardly silent here for a minute because I just need to read through them and see if I can figure this out for you. Any elevators? Yeah, let me look. That's going to be on the floor plans too, I think. So hold on a second. Sorry, this is where being off-site and not being on the management team. Okay, so that, nope, there is not an elevator. And the buildings are 3 floors, which means that if there's not an elevator, I can almost guarantee the accessible units are going to have to be on the first floor because otherwise they're just not accessible. Let me just look at the floor plan. So, and yeah, hold on a second. Okay, so yeah, there's a first floor 1-bedroom accessible unit in building 1. There is a first floor 1-bedroom accessible unit in building 2. There is a 2-bedroom accessible unit in building 3 on the first floor. 2-bedroom accessible unit in building 3 on the first floor. And there's one more and it looks like there's another accessible unit in building 4 on the first floor. And I think that's it. So there are 4 in total. Yeah, you got it. And obviously the management team can give you a little bit more on specifics since they're there and they know the buildings far better than we do. But that's what I'm seeing. Any other questions? Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope this was helpful. Check out our website if you haven't already. Let me just put that again, www.sebhousing.com. You can get an info pack on there. You can get an application on there. They're downloadable. What I covered was mostly from the info pack. There's more detail in there. I didn't get to everything. So take a look. I think a lot of common questions are in there and answered in there. And get that application in early. If you are eligible for this lottery, you have a very, very, very good chance of being able to get one of these units, provided you're lease eligible. So we hope to see your application soon. And thank you, and have a great night, everyone. Good night.